Clawson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I'm absolutely stoked to be having this conversation finally with you. We've been chatting a little bit via Instagram and a little bit over text and the phone for a while now.
Yep.
And man, I think we align a lot in thought and what we think about this trade. This awesome job of ours being a lineman.
Yeah.
And it's super cool to have you as one of my first guests on this podcast. So welcome.
Thanks.
I just want to start by saying thank you for doing this too. I really appreciate it. And let's hear a little bit about you. Where are you from? Let's give us some background.
I think first, I want to talk a little bit about, I think why as German we gravitated towards one another. And I think it's because, Instagram is kind of the in vogue way that people communicate today. And really irrespective of age. I've got kids who, when I talk to them about, want to start Facebook accounts and stuff, they have no interest in that because simple reason is Snapchat and Instagram are the ways people communicate. And so when we started our Instagram page as an effort to reach out to people and let them know what we were doing and let them know a little bit about Whiskey City Utilities, Altec Contractors had and has some of the best material on Instagram. And that's not by mistake. I mean, I recognize, my wife's a professional photographer and I've been in and around people who have produced things for major networks and stuff. Like I was back in New Mexico, I was a professional hunter and got a lot of hunts and things like that. So I've been around people who are really conscientious about the material they put out, the things that people see. And so I recognized early on that, Altec was a company, and Ryan Lucas, I come to find out, it were people who were really interested in and concerned with showing the best of the trade, and not just the best, but capturing really the awesomeness of being a journeyman lineman, the places that we work, things that we do, the difficulty associated with it, the danger associated with it, the beautiful locations that we work in. You and I both worked in some of the most beautiful parts of the United States of North America that exist.
One of the best parts.
Yeah. And so, when I think back into my history in the field, what you present visually to Instagram followers and people that track your stuff, it represents that. So that's what kind of got me interested in you and probably you and us, because the things that we put out on social media, I think reflect accurately the respect that should be attributed to the trades. So a little bit about me. I'm the general manager for Lawrenceburg Municipal Utilities, aka Whiskey City. And the reason that we are Whiskey City is because we have the largest distillery in the continental U.S.
How long has that been around for? Like when was Lawrenceburg established as Whiskey City?
Well, it's so they had a flood in 1937 on the Ohio River that pretty much devastated everything. After that flood, so distillery in general in Whiskey City was here before that. Seagram's was here in the late 1800s, like 1856.
Oh, wow.
And so they were here for 100 years before the 1937 flood. But when the flood occurred, the government decided to build a levee around the city, and they did that to protect the tax base that existed with all of the production of liquor. And so right now, at any given time, we have somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million barrels of whiskey, bourbon whiskey, here in Lawrenceburg at any time. Yeah, it's incredible. It really is. You go into these big warehouses that we have here, and it's just rows and rows and rows of barreled whiskey. MGPI, they bottle, I think, for 196 or blend for 196 different retailers across the United States. They've got a number of their own blends that are truly theirs, that they retail themselves.
Right.
But it's a huge industry here. Also, contrary to everyone's belief, all of the Jose Cuervo stuff is bottled here in Lawrenceburg.
What?
It's not. I know.
I think you just blew the top off of that.
I'm from New Mexico originally, and when I tell my friends back home, especially my Hispanic friends, that go read the back of your bottle of Jose Cuervo to me, and they look at it and they're like, Lawrenceburg, Indiana? Like, man, my whole life's been a lie. But yeah, it's all bottled here. It's brought in by train car, but then it's bottled here by a company called Proximo.
That's awesome. So, you go to Mexico to drink Lawrenceburg tequila.
Yeah. And they do like 3 olives, and I mean, just a number of different things come out of Lawrenceburg. So when we say that we're the whiskey cities, we're truly the whiskey cities.
No kidding.
And we use that name in a way to, like any small community, there's these territorial things that exist, and so that's no different here. You've got Lawrenceburg, you've got Greendale, which is another municipality that's to the north of us. You've got Aurora, which is to the west of us. And they all provide some level of right. municipal services, whether it's water, gas, electric, wastewater. And so when we started our fiber to the home business, we knew that we would probably meet a little bit of resistance going into these other communities as Lawrenceburg.
Sure.
Because, it's just human nature. People are territorial.
Yeah.
So the one thing that we knew was a common name amongst all these communities was the distillery business and the name of Whiskey City. And so we adopted Whiskey City Fiber and Data and Whiskey City Utilities as a way to let those people that were providing services know that we're not just in the camp for Lawrenceburg. We're equally interested in and want to be equally invested in what's happening in your community, just like ours.
Right.
So it kind of took that perceived, territorial thing away. It used to be the Aurora Red Devils. That was the high school team in
sure.
Aurora, and Lawrenceburg Tigers.
Yeah.
And so you'd get into meetings, and I've talked with people, and they'll tell you, I'm an Aurora Red Devil, Lawrenceburg Tiger. And so those things exist, and we like a lot of the things that I do as a manager, maybe I overthink them, but I try to think through all the steps of the process, whether it's providing services to customers and how best to do that, or how to avoid these entrenched kind of stereotypical things. Yeah. I try to think about all the kinds of things that I should be concerned with as a general manager to provide the best services possible to the customers. So
yeah, good for you. That's a story.
I've been in the business since 1994. I went to my first year of college at a junior college in Utah, Snow College. And in the summertime, my uncle, who was a general foreman for a company called Great Southwestern, they're located in Castle Rock, Colorado. He called me and wanted to know if I wanted a job for the summer, and I told him that I did. So I went to work as a railway laborer. And
that's how you got into the trade?
Yeah, that's how I got into it. Went to work for my uncle, who was general foreman, and
what were you originally going to college for?
Engineering.
Okay.
Engineering. Want to get in the engineering trade, and it's kind of what I do now.
Yeah.
But so I went to work, as a groundman in Tucson, Arizona.
Wow.
And surrounded by all these journeymen and stuff, real rough guys, which I wasn't too unaccustomed to. I was raised around cowboys on ranches and stuff, and so I wasn't too kind of unaccustomed to guys being guys and being a little rough around the edges. But the one thing that was new to me was, my whole life growing up doing day work for ranches and hauling hay and doing those kinds of things, I never made a lot of money. I had some money, but I never made a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think about some of the
You're
jobs.
Just living on the ranch and working on the ranch and not getting paid. Yeah.
My cousin Trampus, who's a journeyman as well, works for P&M in Albuquerque. I can remember we went to haul hay one day for a guy in town. Our dads kind of, hired us out. And so we went and hauled hay all day. And when we got to the Dairy Queen that afternoon, at lunch, he told my cousin Trappist, he says, you got sunburn today, you want me to buy you a hat? So he said, sure, buy me a hat. So he bought him a hat. And anyway, we got home that night, and he was writing his checks, and he wrote me a check for like, I don't know, $16 or some ridiculous. And he told my cousin Trappist, he said, well, you got a hat. So Travis got a hat out of the deal, and I got $16. And I guess the joke was on me, because when we got back to the house that night, my grandma took our pants and threw them in the fireplace and burned them up because they were so holy, so ratty. And she burned my $16 up, and he still had his hat. So going to work in the trades, I started making some real money, and I was
kind of get you hooked.
Yeah, it does.
Honestly, really,
it really does. It makes you think about it, and I made the right choice, because it took me down a career path that has provided for me and my family in ways that other people, even people with 1 or 2 degrees, can't do.
I know people like just being in resources. They love that. They love that sound of that money, right? They'll have a buddy that's an apprentice or a lineman or some relative, and they squeak out one night what they're making, and it's all of a sudden they want it, but doesn't mean they cut out for it. So
no,
still takes that special person once you throw a set of hooks.
It does. It does.
Some heights.
The second job I went on was in Nebraska, and they had a major ice storm come through and tear like 9,000 poles down overnight.
Wow.
And so we left Tucson and drove straight. Like I said, I was 18, 19 years old. And we drove, this company put me with a truck and trailer loaded with, tens of thousands of dollars of equipment on the interstate headed to Nebraska. Yeah. And, it was, I guess I'm thankful for the upbringing I had, because I think that a lot of kids would be overwhelmed with that today.
Oh, man.
Maybe not, but I think maybe they would. But so anyway, I made my way to Cozad, Nebraska, and we literally worked can to can 7 days a week, and hooking people back up. And that was my first experience with, because Nebraska is a big public power state. All the public power there by statute is public power. There's no cooperatives there. There's no IOUs. It's all public power. And so we would hook homes up, and they'd have, next thing you know, they'd have this huge barbecue ready for us, and they'd feed us, and they were just so grateful. So I immediately got that, immediately connected with people, the ability to enjoy a way of life or even pay their bills, and how important the journeyman trade was to human existence.
Yeah.
How important providing power was to people.
It's an essential service. Like,
no question.
It gets muted a little bit because of like the first responders thing, and I see it out there, like Lineworks, the forgotten first responder, and I get it, but I don't also support it necessarily. I do in a way, but not in another way, because it's hard to compare a lineman with an actual first responder, a firefighter, and
you're right. And I'll tell you,
it's completely different.
Yep.
It's almost like another bucket. We need another.
It is. It's another bucket.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with 2 individuals on the way to the airport from Colorado Springs, day before yesterday. One of them's name's John Beasley. He was inducted into the Lineman Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
The other is a guy named Brandon Wiley, who works for John for Georgia Power. Not Georgia Power. It's doggone, I can't believe I forgot the name. Electric Cities in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
They'll kill me if I said Georgia Power. They'll kill me. Anyway, so Electric Cities in Georgia. And we had a conversation about this, and we talked about this whole first responder thing and some of the initiatives that are going on in some of the states down here to get linemen recognized as first responders, and that's not who we are. Look,
yeah,
it doesn't matter if a neighborhood loses power. It really doesn't matter if we're there in 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour. I mean, it really doesn't.
Yeah,
because we're not apprehending people.
Yeah.
We're not rendering life-saving, CPR and things like that to people.
Yeah.
We're there to do a job, which is to restore electricity that helps facilitate or support those other functions.
100%.
And so adding this additional level of requirement to a journeyman lineman where he has to think about, look, if you're a journeyman lineman, you know CPR, and you find yourself in a circumstance where you need to give somebody CPR and you can save their lives, by all means do it.
Absolutely.
But I don't think that for a journeyman lineman that needs to be our first function.
It isn't. It's not in our job description.
No.
You know what I mean? Like it is for EMS or firefighting or
No, that's right.
First response. And it, I got 100%.
And for those guys, the time matters, right? If you're going to apprehend somebody or give CPR to somebody, time matters.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, it all matters.
Like time matters, but it's it matters when it comes to electricity, but it doesn't matter like it's a life or death situation in most cases, unless you've got some little old lady who's hooked up to life support or something, or oxygen and it's running out. But that's a different thing altogether.
And it's an anomaly.
Yeah.
That would be an anomaly.
It's important. Electricity is very important, especially in today's world. But putting us in the same bucket as those folks, I think is I don't know if it's the right thing to do. No,
it's not. And the other thing is, when I see these T-shirts that say, and a lot of the guys that are linemen, look, they know I support linemen through and through. Yeah. I beat that drum louder than anybody. But for when you see these T-shirts that say, journeyman linemen exist because firefighters need heroes too. I mean, that's just not helpful. I mean, why look, I want respected. I want respected in what I do.
Yeah.
And I don't need to get respect for what I do by disrespecting somebody else and what they do.
100%.
And the requirements of my job and the things that bring value to my customers and the people I serve don't really have much to do with other people and the services they provide. And the last thing I want to do is be critical of them. I want to be supportive of them. That doesn't mean I haven't given firefighters a hard time now and then.
It's all right to poke and razz. That's okay. That's. But
it's in good fun.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. We got to work as a team. You got to work as a partnership.
Sure.
You're both
Absolutely.
there to do a job, and
not only that,
a lot of cases they do need us in a lot of cases. Like.
Well, I'd hate to be that lineman that needs a firefighter one of these days. Or needs EMS.
Imagine
I do. I want to be on the good side, right?
Yeah. Imagine having that shirt on and you need that.
Yeah. This guy's not going to make it. Sorry. So I think that I don't think any benefit really comes from those kind of debates. And I don't know. I mean, what I guess I could see some rationale behind is not necessarily first responders, but John Beasley said this is like emergency response.
Yeah.
If emergency response gave us an elevated ability to get from point A to point B with people moving out of the way in intersections, things like that, that could be helpful. I mean, that could be something that's beneficial. Yeah. And John's a great person to suggest that because he's, the guy, like I said, he's Lineman Hall of Fame guy, and he's just super intelligent.
I like that. I like that a lot. We are an emergency response, no doubt.
We are, absolutely. There's no question.
It's key to get the power back on as soon as possible in most cases.
And as a journeyman yourself, the areas that need to be turned back on, right? I mean, if you've got hospitals that are
absolutely
that they're having problems and they don't have power, we know the areas that we need to concentrate on. Yep. We know what areas that could probably afford to be off a little longer than others.
Yeah.
And that's just part of being a good journeyman, a good utility guys. You know the areas that are critical. You know the ones that could stand to be out just a little longer.
Yeah, for sure. So let's back it up just a little bit more into a little bit about yourself some more. You said you're a professional hunter, or see a little bit on your Instagram. You're quite into hunting, and there's a couple maybe record deers in there or something.
Yeah. So, I'm from New Mexico originally. We've always been outdoors people, just kind of ranchers and farmers kind of typically are. And, New Mexico's a big hunting state. We've got more big game opportunities there than any of the other Western states because we've got well, you just take all the animals that other states have in common, like black bear, mule deer, elk, antelope, sheep. We have all those. Plus we have ibex and oryx and barbary. We have all those in conjunction. I think we have like 13 big game animals. So it's a big hunting state. And being large landowners in New Mexico, we had, deer and elk. They were a resource. And so when I was working in Gallup as the electrical manager there, at the same time, all my spare time, comp time off, I'd spend hunting. So I spent, 75, 80 days a year in the field. And, I guess maybe call it the type A competitive nature. We always want to kill the biggest animals. And so we killed a number of animals that were what they call governor's tags. So they have these tags that they raffle off each year at these auctions to raise money to support wildlife efforts, Mule Deer Association, that kind of stuff. And so we would, myself and a couple friends that were far better hunters than I am, Tory Brock being one of them, we'd contract with these guys and we'd take them looking for, the anomaly as it relates to elk and deer. So where most guys would be happy killing like a 165, 170 inch mule deer, we were looking for the 215s, the 220s, the 230s. Where guys would be happy killing a 340 inch bull, we were looking for the 390s, the 412s, the 415s, the 420s. And we killed a number of those. We killed some. I think the biggest bull I ever guided on was 438. Killed a number of bulls over 400 inches.
Oh, that's massive.
Yeah. So anybody understands those numbers, right? Knows that's huge. So I was always involved in the outdoors and stuff. And that was part of what I did. My dad, he's at home kind of running the farm and ranch now, along with, my cousin and stuff. And I'm away, making my career in the trades, but we still do that actively at home. And I still guide a couple hunts a year, 2 to 3 hunts a year.
I found it's pretty, I wasn't much of a hunter myself, but grew up with it my entire life.
Sure.
All of my buddies hunted. It's just not something I went into doing. But I found it pretty big in the line trade. Most guys hunt it. It's a food thing up here. I don't know what it's like down there, but up here in Canada, it's most guys are into the outdoors. If they're into doing line work, they're into the outdoors, and it's a hard stretch. Our hunting season is like September, October, November-ish. It's hard to find get a line to work inside those months because they're gone. And they'll tell you straight up too. They're like, "No, I'm gone. If you try to make me work, I'm out of here. I'll just quit. I'll see you again."
Oh yeah. Well, our Lineman rodeo is September 26th, 27th, 28th, and you don't know how many complaints I get from guys in the western states that say, "Man, that's archery elk hunt. Like, what are you doing? Are you a moron?" Well, I just have to pick dates, guys. And I get people out east that say, that's coming into the whitetail season, and so it's a major concern for them, how we schedule things because of the draw. Matter of fact, I've got a couple teams from SRP that are literally telling me, well, we just have to see if I drew any tags. If I drew tags, and you're up a creek. If I didn't, then we'll be there. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But that kind of if we'll talk about Whiskey City Rodeo in just a minute. But
sure,
the reason the Whiskey City Rodeo is so successful is we combine this professional bull riding with it.
Yeah.
And the reason that works so well is there's a few things that the journeyman trade by and large has in common with other things. If you're a journeyman, you probably understand the difference between a diesel pickup and a gas pickup.
Roger.
And you probably own a pickup truck and not a Prius. And you probably know who George Strait is or Merle Haggard. And your beer probably comes in a red, white, and blue can and not some swanky, IPA. You probably know the difference anyway. And that's really common between the doers of North America. When I say doers, I mean the guys that are building things, fixing things, providing services, welders, pipe fitters, the trades.
Yeah.
That's a common thread amongst all those people. And when it comes to ranching and farming, and ranching kind of segueing into these professional bull riders, there's a lot of commonalities. You're listening to the same music. You're liking the same kind of vehicles.
Yeah.
You by and large have the same standards and morals and ideals and thought process.
You like being outside.
So
you like the outdoors. You like building things with your hands. You like
yeah. You're not afraid to get your hands dirty.
Yeah.
You've probably been in a few fist fights.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. You like sweating every day and working hard and feeling exhausted. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know what it feels like to put in a solid day's work and to come home tired and sore. And so we found a lot of commonalities in that. And so by combining the two, what we've done really, because I love the trades, is I know how mainstream the professional bull riding is, and those guys, they're like rock stars, right? Yeah. And so we decided to invite a few of them to our rodeo and actually be on mutual aid teams with linemen and doing stuff that linemen do as part of the mutual aid competition. Not so much to introduce them to it, but because I knew by doing that, we could bring a few thousand people to watch journeyman linemen compete.
So you have a bull riding event, you have a journeyman lineman rodeo, and you take some bull riders and mix them in with your...
So take any lineman rodeo that you go to, has its journeyman events, apprentice events. We do that. Yeah. But when it comes to the mutual aid, we throw a little bit of a curveball. If you're in the mutual aid with us, we randomly select the teams from all the utilities that are there. And we also randomly select a professional bull rider to be on that team. And so the mutual aid score is a 3-part score. The first part of that score is that professional bull rider riding his first bull on Friday night. Okay. Linemen are all there. They're assigned their team. They know their teams early on, so they're palling around with these guys. The second part of that score is the actual mutual aid event, which means these linemen from different utilities and their bull rider get in the arena, go get their pole, get their assignment. It's a mystery event until we announce it. And then this rodeo cowboy has to participate, either run a fuse stick, 40-foot extendo, or a hand line, or do something that contributes to what the journeyman lineman's doing. That's the second part. We time that. You have your gigs, just like any rodeo. And then immediately after that, we have the third part of the mutual aid event, which is their cowboy getting back on a bull and riding that bull. And all those three things together combined make up the mutual aid winners for our rodeo.
Oh, wow.
And it's
what a cool idea. You came up with that idea? Or
I did.
You guys
I did. I came up with it because, like I said, I was wanting to find ways to make journeyman lineman more of a household name, bring it more into mainstream.
Yeah.
And I thought, how can I do this? And I just started thinking about the commonalities amongst, if you're a family, if you're a guy who was raised riding bulls or ranching, doing something like that, you probably have a lot in common with guys who've been climbing poles and those kinds of families. I've got a
lot of line buddies that are actually like past bull riders and bronc riders, and
they have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And you're probably a type A personality that likes competition.
Yeah.
And
I don't think you can be a bull rider without being a type A.
No. And if you are, you're a closeted type A. But you put these guys on the same team together, and we asked some of the bull riders, and you'll see it on some of our. If you go to whiskeycity.com and watch the vlogs, you'll see it. They say, you can tell they want to win. Like, they're all about winning. They want to win. They want to win the event. They want to contribute to those linemen as much as they possibly can, because they want to buckle at the end of the day. And the linemen are the same way. When the judge starts the time clock, they're all about winning that event. And so really the objective was to come up with an event that highlighted the trades. And you go to these lineman rodeos, and I love them. But what you see there, you see vendors, you see the wives and the families, the moms and dads and stuff, some of these journeymen. And you see a few people who are just kind of curious about the events and want to watch and stuff. And I thought, you know what, for what they do, and as interesting as it is to me, how can I get other people there that would never ever watch it?
Yeah.
And we accomplished that by tying this bull riding into it. I'll have 1,200 people there that would never otherwise have come to a Lineman rodeo.
Well, people want to be entertained too, right? They want to be entertained and learn something.
They're completely entertained. And when they see these linemen climbing up the poles like they do and doing their thing, there's nothing boring about that. I mean, how many times have you been on a job where a guy climbs a pole to do some work and people on the street stop and watch?
Oh, every
stop
day,
and watch
every
because
time.
they don't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
They're stopping and watching because it's badass.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, for sure.
It's worthy of attention. So anyway, that's a little bit of a segue, but that's where we came up with the idea. But anyway, I got off on it.
We can keep chatting about the Whiskey City Rodeo. Like, what's the dates on that rodeo?
September 26th, 27th, 28th.
Right before the International Lineman Rodeo. Kind of a good way to get prepped for it.
Yeah, and that's really a lot of the guys that came out and participated last year. That was their commentary. It's a number one. It's a quality event, right?
Yeah.
And all the way through, all the events are quality events. The grounds are quality, as good a place as you could ever go and compete. And then our award show, I think, is completely different than most because we, like this last year, we brought you on stage before Dwight Yoakam. Yeah. And we gave you your trophies on stage for Dwight Yoakam and after Walker Montgomery in front of a crowd of 7,000 people.
Oh, dude.
Tell me what lineman doesn't want to be on a crowd, in front of a crowd of 7,000 people.
No kidding, right? What a good way to draw a crowd. And
yeah. And so these, and then we gave out bottles of whiskey for second and third place, and linemen obviously didn't complain about that. They thought that was okay. I don't know if they still have those trophies, but we give them to them. And but it was one of those things where we're announcing these winners. We're talking about journeyman linemen and what they do, and you had a crowd of 7,000 people screaming their heads off, putting their hands together for guys who are in the trades, and that made me pretty happy.
Yeah, man.
The trades, that made me pretty happy.
Oh, you should be proud of that. That's a big accomplishment and a really cool thing that you're doing for the trades too. Like, I was fortunate. Same sort of thing. I was gonna start school back in the day, but convinced by a foreman that worked for my father's power line company to get out of that, and basically just said, "You're being ridiculous, Ryan. You got an opportunity in front of you to become a lineman, get a trade ticket, and you'll come out of it and you'll be what, 24? Like, what are you doing? Like, don't be an idiot. Go get a ticket. And you always got something to go do." I ended up saying, "Yeah, I know, you're right. I should do that." Day 2 into it, I'm like, I like this. This is pretty cool. And stuck with it ever since. But that's what this is kind of about too. In this project that is this podcast, is to bring awareness to this trade that, it's fed my family for going on 3 generations now. And it's done the same for a lot of other people out there. And it's a really great job, a really good living. You can be made off of it, and you can do some friggin' cool shit. Yeah. And
let me ask you a question. What do you think the average pay is for a engineer in the United States?
Average pay for an engineer's got to be, in the U.S. might be a little different. I don't know, $100,000?
Less.
Really?
$74,000.
74.
What do you think the average pay is for an attorney in the U.S.?
Little over $100,000.
No, slightly more than an engineer, about $75,000.
What?
Yeah, and architecture is right in that same mix. It's in the 70,000s. You know what the average pay for a journeyman lineman is in the U.S.?
Oh, shoot.
For PricewaterhouseCoopers, they're saying the average pay is about $96,000 a year.
Yeah, that's bang on here too.
Yeah, so so let me think about this. I like the outdoors. I don't mind physical work. I want to marry a good-looking woman. So I'm going to go to work as a journeyman lineman. You're going to pay me to go through the apprenticeship. You're not going to put me in debt. You're going to pay me. And when I'm done, I'm going to make about $25,000 more than you are.
Yeah.
Let me think about that a minute.
Just to start with.
And I'm not saying that guys shouldn't go get a degree. Fine, go get a degree. If that's what you want, go do it. But don't tell me don't try and convince me that it is somehow less admirable to be somebody who provides us with the ability to enjoy every single thing we do in this life, a birthday party, a wedding, a reception, any of those things that helps provide comfort to somebody when they're in need. You're telling me that a mother that wakes up at 3:00 in the morning with a sick kid that goes in and flips the light switch on, that she would be somewhat, disappointed if the light didn't come on? We provide some of the most essential services to people. And oh, by the way, I'm going to pay you $25,000 more a year to do that. I think I could find a place to spend 25 grand and not have the student debt. Totally. So when people start talking about, and that's the one thing we have to do, all levels of professionals, and they say it, but they don't believe it. They'll say, well, a guy ought to be a journeyman lineman. There's nothing wrong with the trades. You're not even a journeyman lineman. There's nothing wrong with trades. Be a wastewater treatment guy. Be a water treatment guy. Be a pipe fitter. We need the trades. They're respectable jobs. And then they say, well, what's your kid done? Oh, he's at this school or he's at that school. So it's one of those things where people say, but they really don't believe it because it's good for your kid, but not mine. My kid needs to go. He needs to be an engineer. He needs to be a doctor. He needs to be a lawyer. And we need to get away from that. Yeah. I mean, people see through that. I mean, trust me, they see through it. If you're going to be somebody who believes in the trades and knows they have value, I want you to really believe that. I don't want you just to tell me that. And I really believe that.
Yeah, it's starting to be a real issue, and I don't want to get into like conspiracy theory stuff or whatever, but like the education and the industry behind education could be the cause of, say, the next collapse of an entire economy. Just student loans and debts, and like for what? Like you're saying, you can go work, get paid, take a few weeks off to go do your schooling portion, get back to work, and you're not in debt. You're not coming out of that schooling or that 4 years or 3.5 years of an apprenticeship, $400,000 in debt with a degree that making less than the average wage of a lineman. It's crazy. Well, we need to make trades great again.
we do. I mean, Germany does a great job of that. Germany has programs where kids, when they go through school, when they get to a certain age, can get into apprenticeships. And when they come out of those apprenticeships, they go right into working for BMW or one of these other, companies. And they're not looked at as being, it's not a black eye on that person. It's an esteemed job. And look, they recognize it. They know the value that it has. They know what it does, not just for their country, but for the individual. There's a sense of pride that comes by that. And we became a great country
built off of that.
Built off of industrialization, built off of the trades, built off of guys who were
building things
and engineers who had a vision and could convince guys into building those things. The bridge builders, the guys that build the highways, all these kinds of things. And there's still a huge need for that. And we can't. I mean, why would we ever discourage a kid, regardless of his athletic ability and his intellect, from not being a public power leader?
I think it's in people. I just don't think it's in front of their faces enough. The things that are in front of it's like Gary Vee says, it's an attention thing. So where's all the attention going right now? The attention's into social media, as great of a tool as it is. It distracts a lot of people from reality, I think, right? You can get on social, you can build up, say, your platform. You build up your platform, you build up your profile, and all of a sudden you're making sponsorships and you're traveling. Like, nothing to knock that. That's great. If that's where you find success, that's awesome. But it's, again, not everybody can do that. But I think a lot of the mentality of young people now is like, I just want to do that. I just want to play Fortnite. Yeah. And my son's doing that thing right now, but I tell him every day, you got to move your body still, bud, and get outside.
I think about the recent wildfires in California, and I don't want to get into how those were caused or who's to blame.
Yeah.
I think about the hurricanes that hit the Gulf Coast in Florida, and they have 60,000 journeyman linemen roll into those states that are putting those people's lives back together.
Yeah.
And I mean, what would the economic impact be without them? What would the economic impact be in California after suffering so much loss of life and loss of property, without having skilled professionals that are willing to go in there and build those areas back up and give them back some sense of normality?
Yeah.
Turning the lights back on to homes that haven't had power in 2 weeks or a month or whatever it is. I mean, I just don't think we take it for granted. I mean, to be honest with you, in all of the sectors, whether it's the public water guys, the sewer guys, especially sewer and water guys. I mean, I know how long my wife would last without hot water to bathe and, do the laundry and those kinds of things. And so, I know we're talking about journeyman trade, but essentially all of these guys that are the public servants that provide these essential things to the communities. And that's what separates us from other places. That's what separates us from other undeveloped countries, is we have these things and we prioritize these things, and we have skilled people who can provide these things. I mean, no offense, but every time I watch something on Instagram on like high voltage, and I love those guys, but every time I watch something, it's some like electrical accident that takes place.
Yeah.
Am I surprised they're not speaking English? I'm not.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to be offensive. I mean that to say that in North America, we go to great lengths, and you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
We go to great lengths to make sure that people are properly trained to work in the most dangerous, most critically sensitive areas, and to do so without being killed or injured.
Yeah.
And we prioritize that. We don't just say it anymore.
100%.
We actually think about it, and we actually walk that walk.
Yeah. Plan it out. You rehearse your steps.
Yeah,
you tailboard. You are as safe as one can be. It's as like that video used to say of the barehand guy. It's as safe as getting a hot dog or crossing the street, right?
Yeah.
We make it as safe as we can.
And it has to be that way, because value for human life can't just be for going into these people's, these neighborhoods where these people live in and trying to take care of them. It has to be on every individual, including the worker. And, the good managers, like in these Gulf states that suffer these hurricanes and stuff, they'll know when the storm's going to come in. And it was said at the APPA Lineman Rodeo in some of the breakout conferences that we had. They tell these guys, look, the storm's going to end about dark. 30 minutes before dark, the storm's going to end. And you guys are going to feel, because all linemen, right, when you're in a situation with people out of power, what do you want to do? You want to go restore power.
Yeah.
You want to go out there and get them back on. And the good managers are telling those guys, just wait till morning. We'll hit it at 6:30. And they start off in a very pragmatic way.
Yeah.
They get the guys together. They identify the areas that are hit. They do their tailboards. They do their safety briefings. They identify the risks. And then they very pragmatically go out and methodically start getting the neighborhoods turned back on. And they've done so, and they do so. And they're just so good at it.
Yeah. And
they do it in such a safe way. I mean, it's amazing that you go in those conditions where poles are down and trees are down and all these things, and they can get power restored to those people in those communities without serious injury. You're always going to have the injuries where a guy strains himself or cuts himself or does something, right? I mean, it's going to happen. But they do it without getting guys killed, and they do a really, really good job of it. And
it's a complex job. Like that's what I tell people. Like there's a lot of layers of complexity. Like a lot of jobs have complexity, but when they say, okay, well, what's dangerous about the job, right? I'm like, well, what isn't dangerous about the job? Let's just start by leaving the show up in the morning, right? You've got traffic, and everyone knows what traffic's like, and you're driving long hours, or you're driving short hours, or you're fighting city traffic or whatever, or you're stepping out into traffic, or you're working right alongside the road, or always working right alongside a highway or a city street where people are just going about their day and maybe not being as safe as they should. And you're dealing with heights, you're dealing with electricity, you're dealing with heavy equipment, and any of that stuff can get you. And we deal with it all on a daily and be safe in doing it.
And in those emergency situations, you got guys that aren't from there, right? They come in from,
that's another layer of complexity.
Come in from Canada to California, right?
Absolutely.
You don't know the roads. You don't know this. You don't know that, they give you maps. Maps are supposed to tell you, how things are normally open, normally closed, or whatever else. But you really don't know that. And the only thing that protects you is your training. Verify voltage. Make sure you have visible openings, things like that. And so there are countless number of steps that a journeyman has to know and has to.
That's what always amazed me. A couple times in my career on the tools, like Hurricane Irene, Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast, 24 hours from getting the call in British Columbia, Canada, on the West Coast, 24 hours later, I'm in Connecticut, boots on the ground, hooking up services, hooking up primary, fixing cross arms, fixing poles. 24 hours later, completely foreign. It might as well be a foreign land. Completely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
100% different than here.
And then you'll get into these systems that have like a 7,200 volt system, but they got all these like 4K systems that are fed off of it, and you're supposed to know where that's at. And
absolutely.
You don't know where it's at.
And even like back home, we don't have a lot of IPP, like independent power producers, like little one-man shows with windmills or whatever they got going in their front yard, putting power back on. You go to some areas, it's like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. Never mind, look out for 10 of them on this little single-phase line. Yeah, no, it's a different world when you parachute into a place like that, and that is 100% adds another level of complexity for sure.
Well, we had a pretty bad ice storm here in Indiana this last winter, and it knocked down a lot of stuff, and we didn't have any issues with it, but the cooperatives, while they were out hooking people back up, they had guys with generators at their houses who didn't have a disconnect between, the utilities provided service and their own, generated service. And we had a couple of guys that nearly killed them. They went in and energized a transformer, not knowing this guy had backfed the transformer and had fireball right there and stuff. And, part of me says, well, the guy should check for voltage, right? If you got to check for voltage on that transformer, but when you're out there trying to get thousands of people back on and you're tired, you've been working at it for hours, you probably aren't going to do things exactly as you're supposed to. That's just a fact.
100%.
I'm not trying to make excuses, but man, there's just all kinds of pitfalls a guy can find himself having to deal with that in other jobs you just don't. You just don't have those kinds of things to worry about. And every single location is a different set of circumstances.
Yep.
You've got a pole that's compromised. You got a dog in the yard that wants to eat you alive. Every house you show up to is a different set of circumstances. Process, or the end result is ultimately the same, getting power back on, but it's just as many different people as you hook up, you could find as many different circumstances that you have to deal with. It could be that numerous.
So what are some areas and some places that you've been around? Like, how long you been with LMU? And
I've been in Lawrenceburg for a little over 4 years, but prior to that, I've worked in North Carolina, I've worked in Texas, I've worked in Arkansas, I've worked in Nebraska, I've worked in New Mexico, I've worked in Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Texas. Maybe I mentioned Texas already. Basically just all over the United States, building substations, doing transmission work, doing distribution work as contractors. Worked for some of the really big names in the past, like Jobline and Muslock and Associates. I've worked off of hook ladders, climbing 150 foot on jump ladders to hang a hook ladder, climb down 12 feet to get to the conductor. I mean, I've done all that kind of stuff, and I've worked the distribution side too. A lot of guys don't have that, or haven't worked that kind of. Most of the guys I've worked with have never worked transmission. They've never worked anything over 34.5, which is our sub transmission here.
Right.
That's not a criticism of them by any means.
No, it's just choices.
It's just different.
They found a place they like to call home, and
yeah.
Yep. No, that's
Yep. Built a lot of 345 and 115. A lot of banjo tower and lattice, framing lattice and stand lattice, and been around fly yards and stuff where you're flying fiber in as OPGW, or you're flying sock line in, or you're flying towers in and standing them, those kinds of things. And I've been around a lot of aspects of the utility world, and since 1994, and it's given me a different level of appreciation for those different technical needs within the trade. But by and large, it's all comes down to the same. You got guys who you got to look out for them. They got to know that I have to be able to trust them, or they would have to be able to trust me more than I trust them, because I'm asking them to do things that when they look to me as a leader, they hope that I have some appreciation for, that I have some understanding for the inherent risks, and that I'm only asking them to do things that can be done safely.
I think all these things we talked about are what really builds to that brotherhood. Brotherhood of this trade that might set us apart a little bit from some of the other trades or some of the other jobs in the world, is that it's people staying in close quarters. You're spending just as much time or more. Well, you're probably spending more time with the people you're working with on the daily than you are with your own family. And you're doing a lot of that. A good portion of that day is spent in a dangerous situation, potentially dangerous situation, or a situation where you got to, like you said, be looking out for your bud or your brother.
Yeah.
You're watching his back, he's watching yours. And
well, we can all get struck by a bus at any time, I guess. But when I think about it, let's say you're a finished carpenter. If you mess up and cut an inside angle on crown mold wrong or something like that, nobody dies. Like, everybody's still going home, right?
Yeah.
That can't be said for the journeyman trade, and for a lot of the guys that do things in the services. I'm talking about public utility side or utility side, whether you're a water guy, sewer guy, but especially in the journeyman trade. If you're working, especially when you're doing hot work, you are doing something that requires that you are perfect all the time.
Yeah.
Because to be something less than perfect means you're either, I guess you could hope you're not killed, but I mean, let's just face the facts, the numbers. I mean, you get killed. You make contact with difference in potential, you're done.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you're on 4,000 volts, 7,200 volts, or what you're on. And really, for the lower voltages, I think it's probably a more inherent risk. If you're doing 345 hot, or you're doing 500 kV hot, you really have a lot more leeway than a guy working like 19.9 or 34.5.
Yeah, there's some built-in distance.
It's all down to clearances, right?
Yeah.
100%. If you're working 500 kV hot, they're swinging you in on a ladder, or you're on a bird or something, but you can't reach. No matter what you're doing, you could fall to your death, sure, but you cannot reach far enough.
Yeah.
To create
your minimums are 9 feet or whatever, 8, 9, 12
you can't
feet.
reach far enough to create enough difference in potential to kill you. You just can't do it. But if you're working 19.9, you're on an 8-foot or 10-foot cross arm post insulator, and you're working that hot, and you can certainly reach far enough that it will kill you. And that is absolutely true of 7,200 or 4K or 7620 or whatever the distribution voltage is. But it's just one of those things where you have to be perfect, because if you're not, somebody gets killed, somebody gets hurt.
Yeah.
And the level of hurt that you get you just as well have lost your life. You know, guys get their arms and legs burned off, and they get up to 6-degree burn. I mean, if you get past 3rd-degree burn, you're probably getting killed.
Yeah.
Arc flash alone on a lot of this stuff is just not even worth talking about walking away from it. If you do, you're an anomaly. And so it's one of those jobs that just requires that you be perfect all the time. And I don't know many jobs that require that. Most jobs, a guy can make a few mistakes and ain't no big deal.
Yeah, it's almost like military in a way. I hate making these comparisons because obviously, again, the military is completely different situation from what we do. But I just related to that brotherhood kind of. There's nothing better than knowing too, though. Like you're up in a bucket and the guy's like, you know, your bud's like, watch your left shoulder, you know, getting close on the right, you know, your head's up there, just watch your elbow or whatever it is. Right. And you just know that, hey, you know, like this guy's got me. And then you're doing the same for him. There's not many places that do that. Like nobody's doing that when I go in the office now and they're, hey, watch that door frame to get you.
Exactly.
Like,
but you know what
that
does,
creates something that
creates that bond.
You know, it creates a bond, a culture, something you can't put your finger on, a brotherhood, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And, you know, it's, and it has to be recognized, you know, as a municipal, general manager, I'm over water, sewer, electric, you know, fiber and data. And I genuinely value all of my employees the same. I do. They're all equally as important to me. And I mean that because I make it a point to know them, know their families. And I've got a couple guys, I've lost a couple of guys. You know, when I was back in Gallup, I didn't listen to electrocution, but I lost him nonetheless, and it's a tough thing.
Yeah.
One of them was a guy that I ultimately had to fire because, you know, he was drinking, and I hated to have to do that, but I had to think about all the guys and the guys he worked with and stuff, and I stayed in constant contact with him and trying to help or hope that he would get through that. And ultimately, I got a call from his son one day, told me he'd hung himself. And I mean, right now I'm sitting in front of my Mac computer and I've got his name written on the corner of my computer here, because you do create that bond, and you do, you know, you do have that attachment to him, and you know, I don't feel bad about the decision I made. I do wonder if I could have done things differently, you know, if the outcome would have been differently, but I feel a little bit of personal responsibility over it. But I guess that's just human nature, just loving the guys. But anyway, you know, but I have all these guys working for me, and they may, if I'm being honest, they may at times feel that I pay a little more attention to one group of guys than the other. And it's not because I value them differently, but the reality is there's a difference in the jobs I'm asking them to do.
Yeah.
And there's a difference in the level of risk associated with the things I ask them to do. And so I try to communicate that to them, that, you know, despite my attention to detail when it comes to different jobs, it doesn't have anything to do with the value I place on them as people. It's just that some jobs require a little more attention, and that's just common sense.
It's hard. Like, you can do your best to try to explain it to people, but unless you've lived it, it's really hard to, you know, explain that to somebody. It's really hard to explain this bond you built or brotherhood you built, unless somebody's actually built that. It's like, hey, take your best friend, you know, that'd be the best way to, and that's everybody. That's all of them. Like, take your actual brother, you know, if you get along with them and you love them.
Yeah.
Take your actual brother. And like, that's the relationship I got with all of these guys, and this is the reason why, you know. Yeah, that's why I got a lot of pride for the trade, and a lot of pride in being a lineman. It's an amazing job and an amazing trade, and man, that's what we want to tell the world about.
And that's why we need to be seeking out the best and the brightest kids. I mean, if I think about it, we ought to be actively recruiting guys to be linemen who are, the best and brightest minds in our organization. The guys who are girls. I mean, we're talking about guys, but the guys and girls who are the brightest minds in their schools. That's who we ought to be recruiting, and we ought to be talking about the kinds of things that we provide the communities, the kinds of pay that they can make, because let's face it, everybody wants to make a decent living. And we ought to be doing a much better job at recruiting the best and brightest minds to come to work as journeyman linemen, journeyman women in this trade.
I agree. We got to be harder or more diligent on the front end too.
Oh yeah.
So many just, get into the trade and then they get a little ways into it. And it's like, well, I don't want to tell him he's no good anymore because he's 3 years into this and, or he's about to top out but being in resources, I've had to do that to a couple of guys where I've had to tell them, I try to lay it out to them in the way that get them to think about it themselves deeply first. Like, bud, when you look at your life and look at what you're doing, if you're being serious and honest with yourself, is this for you? You try to persuade them to make the decision on their own first before you actually lay the hammer down and say, you know what, no, it's not going to work out for you. But it's hard to do, and I don't think a lot of people have the guts for that or the leadership abilities for that.
No, but I'm telling you what, there's so much value in knowing the things you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Even as a career, is knowing the things you should do. I think like these kids that do these internships, I think internships are great.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people who I thought, there's been a few young people who did internships. They thought they want to be doctors. They did an internship at a hospital as just doing whatever. And they came away from it thinking, man, this is not what I want to do. And then you have kids that do it and love it. And they kind of get this, this affirmation that that's what they should be in. But I guess the issue I have is I don't know many high school counselors who are sitting kids down saying, let's talk about the journeyman lineman trade. Let's talk about being a welder. Let's talk about
don't even know about it.
Welders for a minute.
Yeah.
Some of the kids I know, I mean, if chances are, if you see some truck that's dolled out to the nines with some young guy behind the wheel rolling smoke, he's probably a welder. There's a good chance he's a welder making $150,000 a year, and he ain't got a college education, or maybe he does. But you know what he has? He has a pocket full of money and every other thing he wants in life.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of guys who came up as welders that, they pick and choose what they do. They go to work down in the Gulf region for a few months a year, 6-8 months a year, and then they take the rest of the year off and do everything they daggum please.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of guys who are journeyman linemen that do kind of a similar thing. They'll go to work for, 8-9 months a year. And they'll take a few months off, and they'll do what they want to do, and they make a fantastic living. And I'm envious of them in a lot of ways. But like I said, they've got great lives, and they provide for their family in every way that's measurable, that means something.
Yeah.
And maybe they sacrifice, I guess the downside would be, and probably why I got into more of the management side of things is, I wanted a big family, and I wanted to be able to spend time with my family. Yeah. And I've got 5 kids, 4 girls and a boy, and I love going to baseball practice, and I love going to basketball practice and going to the games and doing those kinds of things. And even though I worked on the road for a lot of years, and I loved it. I loved all those experiences. And I also don't make as much money as some of those guys that are on the road, but my objectives kind of shifted, right? I want to be home more often, and that's okay.
That's what's cool about the trade as well, though, is, there's a spot for that within what we do as well, which is, you want to go work transmission and make big dollars and fly in helicopters and, be tramping around. Yeah. Awesome. Go, give her, fly at it. When you want to settle down because you've been doing it for 15 years and you spend 300, like I was spending 300 days a year on the road. And I got a lot of buddies in that right now.
Yeah.
There's a place for you to come back to if you've done it right, and wiggle your way in somewhere and settle down. And you can do that. And hey, tomorrow, if you need some more money and you need to go back out on the road again, kick your boots. Let's go.
Well, see, I guess that's my point is we were at American Public Power's rodeo in Colorado Springs. And after they have the rodeo, they have the ENO, which is the engineering and operations meeting. And I go into those meetings, and you don't know how much I enjoyed looking up and seeing ball caps in the audience, because I know that there's linemen who have stayed behind to sit through the engineering and operations breakout sessions. And I think that's important, because I just have to believe that some of the future managers, some of the best future leaders we have in public power are guys that were putting their hooks on and climbing poles, doing the cross arm change out or doing whatever in the competition. I have to believe that some of those guys, that's who we should be recruiting. That's who we need to be cultivating and bringing into the leadership roles, are those guys that understand line work, that understand linemen, that understand the trade, but also can crunch the numbers and figure out the finances and figure out the engineering piece to the projects that can bring real value to it. I mean, the best engineers I've ever met are engineers that have spent some time in the field actually erecting things and building things, right? Because they understand. It's not
you
just
nailed it right
any
there,
engineer
for sure.
Put something on paper, tell you go build it. And the most passionate fights I've ever seen is between linemen and engineers griping about, well, just because you put it on paper doesn't mean I can build it, kind of thing, right?
Well, so I'm looking at this. It's going to fall down. Well, it doesn't say that on paper. Well, I'm telling you, I just built it and it fell over.
So you take these guys that have some background in that, and they make exceptional engineers because they have this real world application kind of built into them. And so I think that's who we ought to be recruiting from, and not just that, but I mean, we've already got their attention. They're already in the trade. And we have so many people wanting to leave the trades and go do other things and retiring, that, like I said, back to those high school counselors. I don't see high school counselors telling kids they ought to be journeyman linemen or journeyman women, or journey women, or whatever you want to call it. I just don't see that. And so I just think it's a missed opportunity for us as people in the trade.
There's a lot of
so I'm an advocate for that. I'll put it that way. I'm an advocate for that.
Yeah. There's a lot of work that could be done there, and a lot of recognition. It goes into everything. Like, well, people are getting cheaper too, right? Like, people are not wanting to pay as much for the work that's getting done, and that factors into it a lot as well. And so there's a lot to do, a lot of recognition that could be put out.
Well, I'm going to tell you some of the. There's a guy named Aaron Hederall. He works for Kissimmee down in Florida, and Kissimmee Utility Authority, and he is as bright and as talented a manager as I've ever met. And I think, I'm a general manager, so as far as things are ranked, I'd be above him, right? And I serve on the American Public Power Board of Directors, and I'm, these kinds of things. But I mean, when I talk with him and visit with him and stuff, I'm just always so impressed in the skill sets that he has and his understanding of the business. And I've told him a number of times, there's no part of this industry that you couldn't go and do and manage that wouldn't excel, because that's who you are. And there's other guys like Brandon Wiley who similar, just phenomenal linemen, know the trade inside and out, understand the business side, can get up in front of a crowd of 200 people and speak eloquently about the trades and about the benefits of additional safety and the finance side of things and the reliability side of things. And I think that any organization would be absolutely benefited by having men of that caliber leading their organizations. And I kind of look up, I look up to both of those individuals and guys like John Beasley and others. I look up to them because I really don't care that they have a degree. They're just exceptional leaders in the industry. Yeah. And I have to firmly believe that at some point in their careers, they'll get their just desserts. They'll be recognized for who they are.
Yeah.
And if I have anything to do with it, they would be. Guys like Jim Binkley, he's here in Scottsburg, Indiana. This guy, if you were to cut him, he'd bleed handline. I mean, the guy's a journeyman through and through. Both his boys have gone through climbing school and gone on to, Northwestern Lineman College and things like that. And, Jim is just one of these guys that I think it's safe to say that every dream he's ever had's been about line work.
Yeah.
And he's just a phenomenal public power guy. Somebody that you ought to definitely talk to. He's on the Lineman Hall of Fame board of directors.
I would love to.
Made a number of trophies for us that are just fantastic trophies, one of a kinds. And he's just a guy that's just an absolute stalwart when it comes to the trades, and somebody that promotes the trade in a way that you'd hope they do.
Yeah,
they're just great
awesome.
guys.
Well, that's what we all got to do. I feel it's like my responsibility. I was just saying this to somebody yesterday that just the potential behind this here, like talking and opening this kind of a conversation up to whoever's interested in listening to it, which it seems like getting some pretty good feedback off of it. Like it's going to be a good idea to do this kind of thing. Like this is I feel a responsibility now, almost a weight behind this. Like this could be something really big, like better not muck it up,
Yeah.
Like this, you could do something really cool with this. Like listening to Dell talk about Brandon's story yesterday, I was just like, wow, like that.
Yeah.
Like, if we can get that story out there and get a couple people to change the way they think about something that they were potentially maybe going to do one day, that would have hurt them, just because of something like this they heard on this, man. That's what it's all about.
I think that the value to you talking to a lot of different people. Look, I'm certain I have different opinions about things in the industry than others. I know that I do. But that doesn't mean I'm right or wrong. It just means that collectively we all have something to add to the discussion.
Yeah.
And I had discussions with linemen. We're sitting around a fire in Colorado Springs and just talking about the trade, and everybody's exchanging stories and stuff, and just talking about what they used to do, and they were linemen and whatever else, and pretty comical. A lot of it pretty comical.
Yeah.
Right. But it's just the thing that we all came away from is nobody like challenged anybody on their experience. Nobody said, well, you're not a journeyman because you didn't have this or you didn't do that or whatever else. Everybody just kind of listened to what people had to say about it, and everybody talked about how things have improved, right? Yeah. And maybe they didn't necessarily agree with what I did when I was young, or I didn't agree with what they did when they were young, or whatever. But the one thing we could all agree on is that all of those experiences, by talking to other journeymen and sharing that with each other, that we made the industry a better industry. We made it a safer industry.
Yep.
American Public Power came up with its own safety manual around the 2004, I think, or 5 timeframe, somewhere in there, maybe 2010. And it was a higher standard than just your OSHA handbooks. And we can plot out, we can actually see from the data, from the number of accidents and stuff that haven't happened, a couple things: the introduction of that safety manual. Yep. And if you don't have it, you should really look at it because it is an extremely high standard. And also the American Public Power Lineman Rodeo. Yep. And the Lineman Rodeo is important because you get journeymen from different places talking about things, right?
Right. Good way to communicate.
Notes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They start comparing notes and they say, well, man, we don't do that back home.
Yeah.
Why do you guys do this? Well, yeah, I take and ground all my trucks to the system return because that's the quickest path back to the relays.
Yeah.
Instead of putting on that number 6 copper, I take it up and put it on. And so these kind of things happen. People talk about this kind of stuff, and they go home and they elevate their own game back home.
Yeah.
And so American Public Power, which I think does the best job in North America when it comes to safety, when it comes to providing power and reliability to the customers. I don't know that you can fairly compare us with the other organizations. And I'm not trying to detract from them, but we do a couple things really, really well. One of them is safety, and the other is the improvement on reliability back in our own districts and our own territories. But everybody comes up together, right? If we're doing things to a higher level, or another organization, the cooperatives are doing things to a higher level, if we pay attention to that, we stand to benefit from that. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's an absolute good thing.
That's what this is supposed to be. That was a piece of my vision for this, was to keep that conversation going in a way, have someone like yourself on to share your stories, your line stories, as well as what you can contribute on any topic that you think might benefit another lineman out there. And to have all these things, where we're talking about leadership or grounding bonding or transformation or whatever, back health, paying attention, like something like that. That's what I want to have, eventually have guests on here as well that might not even be directly related to line work, but that can, talk about back health, I'm
going to tell you,
talk about taking care of your body, body positioning, things, ergonomics, like things you might not even think are related to line work, but then when you listen to it, you go, man, I could really do a few things different. Like I think about some of the poles you've been on. Your knees are hyperextended, your back's curved in a friggin' awkward way. You're reaching, you're pulling. Like, if you could think of it a little differently and put yourself.
Well, I think we do need to look outside the trades for examples of things, because what happens when you put some old journeyman up there right in front of everybody?
Just get it done, damn it.
He gets up there and is like, back when I was a kid, and we had to go out and chop the trees down in the woods to actually have poles to climb, and gets into this thing. Everybody just kind of puts their attention on like autopilot, right? When we were in Colorado, we went ziplining, me and some of the guys in the RP3 committee and just a few of the other guys, and we had this young girl named Jay who was guiding us through the ziplining. And the ziplining there at the Broadmoor in Colorado, some of these spans were like 1,800 feet and 600 feet over the ground, right? Yeah. And I told everybody, we all agreed when we were done, we're like, man, we should have had her come and talk to the group about maintaining a point of contact and safety, because she was excellent. Yeah. I mean, she's checking the harnesses and stuff, and never making a mistake. When we're going up and down the ladders, we had to, clip in and maintain, 2 points of contact and all this kind of stuff. And she knew the OSHA regulations about, safe wind speeds you could work in and stuff. And she's probably 22, 23 years old max. Yeah. And all these old, salty journeymen are standing there, and she had our full attention, because taking this up on these poles that are, to ride the zip line that's 600 foot over the floor of the canyon. Yeah, you got my attention. I'm going to listen to you. Yeah. And so we can look outside of our own trades for people who can add value to what we do. We're not always going to be the smartest people in the room. Yep. Probably a lot of times we won't be the smartest people in the room. Yep. And it would be a mistake for us to not listen to other people who have experiences that could lend to the safety and to the advancement of the trade, because there are people out there that have nothing to do with the lineman trade that could provide benefit to us as journeymen. A big,
you nailed it. A big thread that I want to run through this podcast project as well is leadership, and the importance of leadership, and educating as much on it as we can, because it's something that we could all, like, no matter what stage of life you're at, no matter what stage of leadership you're at, you can learn more. Yeah. It's going to be a thread I'd like to put through this whole podcast for sure. This has been a great conversation. We talked a little bit previously, just to shift gears a bit, but get back to yourself for a second. We talked about your old man, and I thought there's some cool stories within that. If you want to share a little bit about who he is and who he was.
Yeah, he he was he's always been the hardest working guy I've known, always. Even now, he's 70 years old, and he's back home in New Mexico. He's working the farm, and he's doing all those things with the cattle and stuff. And I feel bad that I'm not there to help him, but he's always been the definition of somebody who would put in an honest day's work.
Yeah.
And somebody could do anything. Like, I honestly thought he could do anything. He could frame houses. He could wire stuff. He could fix cars. He could. He was.
Yeah, my old man's the same way.
Yeah, arm wrestle champion of his university back in 1969. He was just, a world class rodeo cowboy. Kind of revered as just being a tenacious competitor, and always loving and supportive and tough, a disciplinarian. He just didn't put up with much, and I'm glad he didn't, because I was the kind of kid that probably taken more leeway than I should have. So he expected that we probably his biggest thing. The one thing he told me, that he said, I can take anything from you, anything, any kind of news, bad news, mistakes you've made, but the one thing I won't put up with is if you lie to me. You just can't lie. Because if you lie to me, I just can't do it. After that, there's just nothing else. If you're dishonest with me, there's nothing else I can work with you on. And so that always stuck with me, almost to a fault. I've kind of come up with the theory that if you don't have anything good to say, you ought to say it anyway, because people need to hear the truth. And
I like that. And
so I don't see much value in telling people things that placate them or appease them. But yeah, my dad, he's actually very involved in line work, utility work, and it was really kind of strange, because it's not why I got into it at all. Yeah. My dad, from a young age, he was on the board of directors for Continental Divide Electric Cooperative in New Mexico, and has worked his way up and represents the state agencies on a lot of things, and he actually was chairman of the board for Corporate Finance Cooperative, which is in Virginia, and just a very, very well respected person in the industry, extremely respected. And some people would probably think that I got into the trade because of that, but it really didn't have anything to do with it. I mean, my uncle was a general foreman that was building airports in Saudi Arabia, and worked for Suncorp and doing all these huge highway projects, and worked on the northern slopes up in Alaska, the pipeline, and is just an absolute talent when it comes to dozer work and road work and just managing guys, just phenomenal. And so he just found his way over into the transmission world, erecting towers, pushing a crew, putting up big 500 and 750 kVA towers, lattice towers and stuff, all through Washington and those mountains. And so just really a well-respected person in the industry. And like I said earlier, he offered me a job one summer, and I took it, and it didn't have anything to do whatsoever with my dad. And so it's kind of like this weird thing that's come together. But now my dad and I talk all the time about, like, when I was in Colorado, him and my mom drove over and saw me, and he was on his way to Denver to a statewide association meeting for cooperatives. And he gives me a hard time about being a public power guy, and he's in the cooperative world, and we kind of rib each other on that once in a while. But I presented there at APPA on how to attract and keep your talent. When you get, what's the cost of what, because this whole thing when Puerto Rico happened, the question that was asked of some of the APPA staff when it came to training people in Puerto Rico was, well, if we train them, they'll leave. If we give these guys the training, these linemen the training, when they get these skill sets, they're going to go to other places to work.
Wow.
And the question that was asked back to them was, well, what's the cost of not training them?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the human capital associated with and the risk associated with not training them? What's the reduction in the quality of services you're providing by not training them? So it's just one of those things that, yeah, it's a tough thing to figure out. So myself and Aaron Hedderall and another good friend of mine, Troy Adams from Elk River Utilities over in Minnesota, we presented kind of jointly on this thing about how to keep and attract talent. And my mom and dad were there watching, and after the meeting, we went up and had a little bit early lunch. And my dad says, "Well, I figured out you guys have the same problems we have." So that at the end of the day, we're all facing the same struggles. We're all
we are
dealing with the same issues. It's whether you're up in Canada, or you're on the east or west coast, you're probably wrestling with the same critical issues as anyone else.
Yeah.
Getting talented people, training talented people, retaining them once they're trained, keeping them safe, and providing
all of the above. Absolutely.
Providing the services that the customers expect and doing it at a cost that's sustainable. So back to my dad, so he was just this loving taskmaster. He demanded respect. He got it, even to this day. When I'm in difficult, and he's a saddle maker too. So he was, as my grandpa was, they've been making saddles since 1940s, and they've made them for like Robert Duvall and Robert Redford, and
oh wow.
The oatmeal man, John Brimley. So
cool.
So all these, so we watch these old westerns, and my dad would be like, "Oh, that's a saddle I made," And so there was a time he was making like 60 saddles a year, and he's making quite a few less than that now. But
so he still manages to make saddles and.
Oh yeah, he's still actually making saddles. Like, he sent me a gift the other day. Showed up. He asked me if I got this gift, and I told him no. Yeah, I thought he shipped it to the house. Anyway, it showed up here at the utility. It was this custom made, concealed carry shoulder holster he made. Yeah. So yeah, he's still actively doing all that, and on the cooperative board, and he's got the ranch and the farm that he's taking care of, and then he was a superintendent for a Bureau of Indian Affairs school in New Mexico for a number of years too. And so he was an educator. He went back to school later in life and got his degree and was an educator, and valued that and that experience with those kids. And he just taught me so much, because there was like nothing he couldn't do. Right? He'd go take care of cattle, take care of the stuff at the farm. We all called him the caveman, because he was just as stout as you could ever one person deserve to be. He was just, you didn't want to give him things with moving parts, because he'd break them. He's just horribly, horribly strong. And
bow hunter too, or something, hey?
Bow hunter, yeah. I mean, and he just a natural. So, Cabela's Browning came out with this bow. This is like in 1980 something. And he still has that bow today, and I've looked at it. It's got these really little, cams on it, and doesn't have a very high draw strength at all. And he's a phenomenal hunter. I mean, just stupid dumb luck, just I don't know, just horribly talented hunter. And so he'd gone to, when my mom and him were first married, they'd gone up to Nevada, and he was guided deer hunts up there with my Uncle Grant Gerber. And these guys had come to Elko, Nevada to deer hunt, but really they were coming to gamble and do other things. And so my dad said he was constantly in these positions where he'd have to go out and, kill a deer for these guys to take back home with them. So he's killing like, 40 to 60 deer a year. And I'm sure statute of limitations would prevent him from being prosecuted for that. But anyway, he's killing like, he was killing more animals than the plague. And has all these photographs, these giant deer he's killing up there in Nevada and stuff. And so he got home, or later in life in New Mexico, he kind of told me that he didn't really wasn't interested in killing deer or elk with a rifle anymore. He just said there wasn't any real sport to it. It just didn't appeal to him. So he just picked bow up one day. And I remember coming home, he was shooting 200 or 300 arrows a day, because just like when he's team roping, his dad wouldn't let him actually team rope competitively until he could catch the rope and dummy clean 100 times in a row.
Gotcha.
And he kind of moved that into other things. Free throws as a basketball player, you name it. But so
kind of falls under that 10,000 rule.
Yeah. So he was shooting 200 or 300 arrows a evening, and practicing, and he didn't just do that, but like, he'd read in these books that if you ate meat, it would cause you to be harder to conceal your scent. And so my dad, the most manly guy, North America, he quit eating meat and changed his whole diet so he would have this like better opportunity, right? And so the first time he
stopped eating meat so he could go out and shoot
just
meat.
So he wouldn't stink. And then he was washing all his clothes and hanging them out in the pine trees around the house, and all this stuff. And anyway, so he goes down to Catron County, New Mexico. First time ever hunting elk, and he's with a bunch of guys that hunted elk a ton, and not the first time hunting elk, but the first time hunting elk with a bow. And he goes down there and he kills this 370-inch bull, and like first day out, and everybody else was just kind of hating on him for it. And then like the next year he kills like a 234-inch mule deer with his bow, double droppers. And then he goes and kills a bear and does all these things, and we'd go down and shoot prairie dogs at our farm. He brings bones, be launching arrows out there at 100 yards of prairie dogs. It's just ridiculous. But yeah, he just seemed like everything. He just moved from perfecting one kind of a thing to the other. He'd just take this up for a little while and perfect it. And then he'd pick this up and perfect it. And then he'd get into this. And it just was a constant example of what hard work and determination can do for a person. And I honestly,
sounds like it rubbed off on you.
There's nothing like people would say, well, can you do that? I never knew the words, no, I can't do that. Like it just didn't exist. I mean, it might've been hard, but I thought, well, yeah, I could probably figure that out.
Yeah.
So I just, figured it out, and that all comes from my dad and him being that kind of guy. I've never been intimidated by any circumstance I've ever been in. And I haven't been, because I guess ignorance is bliss. I had a guy around me that he was never intimidated. So why should I be?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Off.
Yeah. So I'm eternally grateful to him for that.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, I think this is a good place to possibly wrap it up. I want to start asking people, just for more reference material. Like we talked a little bit, like I shared that I'm a big audio book fan and podcast fan, obviously. And what are you listening to these days, or what are you reading?
And Audible.
Yep.
The books I've been listening to here lately is Empire of the Summer Moon.
Okay.
It talks about the rise of the not the rise of, but it documents the Native Americans that were the horse people,
okay.
The Comanches and the Apaches, and it talks specifically about Quanah Parker, and what I like about it is it gets into all this factual stuff related to like journal entries by soldiers that really didn't have a vested interest in trying to promote themselves. Now, some of them did,
yeah.
But it contrasts them with the ones that didn't, that just logged their daily, struggles and things. And so it gives you a pretty good, pretty accurate picture of what was happening out in Comancheria, and really what was everything from say Floydada, Texas, and the Cap Rock, all the way up through the plains into Kansas and the southern parts of Wyoming and stuff. And if you really, when you get into it, those areas were uninhabited because the Native Americans wouldn't let us inhabit them. I mean, they ran the Spanish out, and for 150 years, they killed every white man that set foot on that place. They were 20,000 strong at one point, and they had 30 to 40,000 horses. And it wasn't because we weren't interested in taking that from them. We couldn't take it from them.
Yeah.
I mean, we just could not. There was nothing we could do to outsmart them, outflank them, outmaneuver them, outfight them. We just couldn't. Sadly to say, reading the book, the only way that we were able to finally conquer those people is, we killed the buffalo off. And when we did that, the buffalo was everything to them. It's what they made their homes.
Their food supply,
their food supply, everything they had came from the buffalo. So when we started killing the buffalo off, we really put them in a position. So it's an excellent book. It's called Empire of the Summer Moon, a story of Quanah Parker. Yeah. Some of it's a little bit inaccurate. The book was written a long time ago, and they've got some additional stuff today that kind of brings it into a more accurate light.
Yeah.
I also have recently been reading How to Hug a Porcupine.
Okay.
Secrets of
Explain.
Yeah, the secret of dealing with people with difficult personalities.
Oh yeah, perfect.
I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm doing that. It's easy ways to love those difficult people in your life, and I'm doing that to help my wife deal with me. So I think I'm the porcupine. But so yeah, stuff like that, and then just history books. And then I geek out on some stuff that's like that's a little Harry Potter-ish, but mostly stuff that interests me is the stuff that's historical. And
you were telling me you're into military history.
Yeah. So one thing about like coming from New Mexico to back here in Indiana is, I'm right on the Ohio River, and it is so apparent to me why so much history exists along these waterways. They were the freeways of the time. I mean, that's how you move things in and out. Lawrenceburg's a relatively small community, but Abraham Lincoln stopped here 3 times during his time to make speeches running for office and stuff, because
for the whiskey.
What? Yeah, probably. but it's because the rivers. And so if you look at these communities, they had all of the people who wanted to help develop and create things in this country were located along the riverways. St. Louis, Memphis, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. It's no mistake why these. And so when I drive around, you go into Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is really, it's understood to be the Paris of the West, because the architecture that exists in Cincinnati is absolutely phenomenal. There's almost no place in Cincinnati that you go that does not have some building that has some architectural importance to the United States. Just incredible architecture. And then there's a ton of people that when you start looking through it, that were born and raised here, that did things that were absolutely critical to the development of this nation. We have Eads Parkway, which runs through Lawrenceburg, and that's John Eads, who was born and raised here, went on to St. Louis, developed the bridge building techniques that crossed the Mississippi, one of the first bridges that crossed the Mississippi. And he also designed what they called the Ironside boats that allowed the America to beat the British in a lot of the wars that we had. Wow. And then he went on, and he wasn't formally educated. This is one of the incredible things. He wasn't formally educated, but he had a hunger for knowledge. Read a lot of books, and just kind of came up in his own way. But he also developed this jetty system that, a lot of times in the early parts of the country's history, they couldn't get boats out to sea in the Gulf off the Mississippi because it would silt in. Yep. And so they didn't know how to fix it. Nobody could figure out how to fix it. And so John Eads developed this jetty system where he would go in and they would intentionally narrow the channel of the Mississippi. And by doing that, they increased the velocity. And that in turn cut all the silt out and pushed the silt out. So he really used he harnessed the power of the Mississippi to kind of take care of itself. And that jetty system still exists today. He also developed like these underwater bell systems to be able to go down. I think how he kind of made his money as he developed this, and he'd go down the Mississippi and find these wrecks, and he'd recover all this stuff off these river boats for insurance companies. And so he developed like this underwater ability to, the old, the guys in the big tanks and stuff with the hose coming down.
Yeah, for sure.
Pumping water, doing that whole thing. So he kind of perfected that. And like, he was the guy down there in the suit doing it. It wasn't like some guinea pig. Like, he was the guy down there. And and just a brilliant guy. And so I love that kind of history. I love the fact that one of the bridges over here in Cincinnati, the Roebling Bridge, that was John Roebling who built the Brooklyn Bridge. And if you look at the Roebling Bridge in Cincinnati, it's a miniature version of the Brooklyn Bridge. And so cool. You start thinking about all these things that happen that are just historical and critical to the nation, these empire builders. And I just love that. I love that history. Yeah. I love seeing it. I love reading about it.
It relates nicely to the trades.
It does. It really does. They were the builders. Yeah. They were the people who did the impossible, that had the vision to do the impossible and stick with it, perfect it. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, if anyone wants to ask you a question or reach out to you, how do they find you? If you want to know more about the Whiskey City Rodeo, or
go to whiskycity.com. Whiskycity.com. It's Dale said it best. It's one of the best rodeos she's ever been to. Not to put down the others, but it really is a phenomenal rodeo that is all about promoting in every way that we can the journeyman lineman trade.
I'm definitely trying to get there this year. You guys do a hell of a job. I love the vlogs. Dale's a character.
I
love to meet that guy. He's hilarious.
And the we're talking about getting people outside the industry, like this girl that did all the safety and stuff. Dale was the perfect guy. Because the worst problem a journeyman lineman has, or somebody in the trades has, when somebody asks him about what you do, we start talking in our language, right?
Yeah.
So you got this cutout, it's porcelain cutout, it was tracking on the backside, and so we started talking all those things, and people they're just like, I don't know what you're saying. I have no idea what you're talking about. And so for getting Del Brisby in there, somebody that doesn't know anything about the trades, he explains things in a way that people that aren't in the trades understand. Like in this latest one, if you look on Facebook, he's talking about Travis, who's the apprentice. He said, you got 2 guys on the team, at a minimum of 4 years training. And then you got Travis. He says, I'm using the pinky because he's the apprentice.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Travis is kind of like, he says, he's got kind of like a gopher. So if you're in a bathroom, you run out of toilet paper. He says, hey, Travis, bring me some toilet paper. And he hands it in a stall to you. That's the apprentice. That's not exactly what it is, but people that aren't in the trade say, oh, yeah, okay, I know that
get
guy
it.
is. I can relate. So he's a perfect guy to tell the story, because he tells it in a way that I wouldn't tell it, tells it in a way that you wouldn't tell it, but he tells it in a way that the majority of the people around us understand.
No, it's brilliant. That's a good way to bring. I love, bringing comedy into it as well.
Yeah. It's all about presentation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. It's all about presentation. There's got to be an appeal. I mean, more than anything, when people get on social media, they want to be entertained or intrigued.
Yeah.
And just to get out there and tell a story about the journeyman trade, and to not do it in an entertaining way, you're just not going to get you're not going to get the people's attention. I mean, that last video that we put on there, I want to say that it's, when I was looking at our reach, it's gotten over 150,000 people have interacted with it.
Yeah.
It's got over 200 likes and over 250 shares on Facebook. And I'm going to tell you something, for us, a little municipality like us, that's massive.
Oh, dude, you're doing it. You're doing massive. It right. I was, so like you said at the beginning of this, Instagram kind of brought us together for that reason, that we're doing things similar, and really trying to promote it in this way. And you're doing it right, man. It's
and you some of the names, like there's SoCal Lineman.
Yeah. Yeah,
he does stuff that it's great. East Coast Lineman does
East
stuff.
East Coast is brilliant. Like,
I'm telling you, his comedy side, like I'm telling you right now, I love watching him post stuff, because my wife would be like, at night in bed, she'd be like, what are you laughing at? I'm over there watching him,
Oh man, I get stuck in the rabbit hole watching. I'm buried like a year down in his feed, just like, dying.
Yeah, the high voltage industries does some really cool stuff. And I mean, there's just a lot of people putting some good content out there that it all has one thing in common. It gets your attention, and it's enlightening at the same time. Like, you learn a little something. Because even East Coast Lineman, the stuff he talks about, it's all humorous and stuff, but there's a lot of reality stuck in that.
Heck
Lot
yeah.
of the stuck in it.
Yeah, it's straight up. It's real. And
Yeah.
if you're in the trade, you understand it.
Yeah,
It's
that's a fact.
yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, you got any other closing things you wanted to mention or say, or good place to
The only
cut
thing
it
I'd
off?
say is if I'm going to do a shameless plug for Whiskey City Rodeo is just because of the amount of people that we have to help us put it on, we're probably going to try to cap teams at around 25. If we can get some additional volunteers to help us, or the teams that enter bring a judge, that'll alleviate some of that. We could go a little higher, but other than that, we encourage everybody to reach out to us, and if the teams want to get involved, to go to whiskeycity.com and go to the rodeo section of that page, and
do you list positions that you need filled, or is that just up to you guys? You say
we have we try to provide for all the teams, so when they come in, they don't have to worry about logistical things. They can just come in and compete. Yeah. I think that's important. They can come here and have fun. Last thing a lineman wants to do when he goes someplace is try to help figure things out, right? Just come here and have fun.
Yeah.
And so we try to provide for all that, and we've got a pretty robust volunteer staff that helps us with that. If they bring a judge, we comp the judges.
Yeah, judges are always welcome.
Yeah, judges are always welcome. There's always need for that. But more than anything, we just encourage guys that are interested in coming to get in there and enroll, so that we can make room for them.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Olin, it's a great conversation. It was
I've enjoyed it.
Super good to finally do this, and we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for being on.
You bet, man.